Welcome back to Educator.com's English Grammar course. This lesson is on idioms. Let's get started. Alright, we're going to begin this lesson with a brief overview. We're going to ask what is an idiom, find out what they are, how they work. We're going to look at where idioms come from, their sources. They mostly come from older forms of English, from daily life experiences, and from literary and artistic references. Then we're going to learn how to use idioms and, particularly if you're new to English, how to learn idioms, how to learn what they mean, how to figure out what they actually do. Alright, what is an idiom? Idioms are one of the most complicated parts of the English language because they really don't follow any clear rules. They're all references to something, but you may not know what, and they're a shorthand for ideas. An idiom, generally, is an expression that means something other than what its words literally suggest. An idiom is a kind of metaphor, which is a colorful shorthand for a larger idea. So, you might have heard someone say, it's raining cats and dogs. If you looked out the window to see if there were actual animals falling out of the sky, people probably laughed at you. You might have heard someone say, I've taken a shine to you. This in no way involved a polishing cloth. You might have heard someone say, Joe and Mary, or two other people of your acquaintance, are going to tie the knot, or jump the broom, or get hitched. What does that actually mean? We're going to find out. You might have heard someone talk about somebody always tilting at windmills, which sounds completely insane because why would windmills tilt? We're going to look at that one. And you might have had someone advise you to strike while the iron is hot and looked around to see if there was a hot iron anywhere in the vicinity. It does have a meaning, and we're going to look at it. All right. Where do idioms actually come from? Like I said, they're all references to things, so what are they references to? Idioms in English can come from just about anywhere. Some of them come from older forms of English or old traditions. So you'll find some idioms that are actually corruptions of older English words that we don't use anymore, and they sound kind of like a modern word that may or may not be related, so we just say the modern word. And some of them are references to old traditions. So we had Joe and Mary who were going to tie the knot, jump the broom, and get hitched. All three of these idioms mean get married. Tie the knot. Marriage ceremonies used to include a bride and groom basically tying themselves together with a rope or a string. They would tie the knot together to indicate that they were now married. There were also marriage ceremonies traditionally in England that involved the bride and groom holding hands and jumping over a broom. So we say jump the broom to get married. Get hitched also comes from that tying the knot ceremony. So all of these things mean get married, but they only make sense if you study English wedding customs from several hundred years ago. A little bit of a problem. Better just to learn the idiom. All right, where else do they come from? Some of them come from daily life experiences or experiences that were common when the idiom was created. So you might have heard the idiom, you've got to strike while the iron is hot. Well, instead of looking around for the household appliance that you use to press your clothes, think about blacksmiths. Okay, a couple hundred years ago when this idiom was much more common and possibly even created, pretty much every village or every large city had at least one blacksmith, somebody who made things out of iron. Well, if you ever watched someone working iron, they get it really, really hot and then they hit it with a hammer to flatten it out or shape it or whatever. So to strike while the iron is hot is to strike when your blow will be most effective. If you hit iron with a hammer while it's cold, you're just going to make a loud noise. If you hit it while it's hot, you'll shape it. So strike while the iron is hot means take advantage of an opportunity. The metal is hot, hit it with your hammer now so you can actually do your job. Still, other idioms are actually references to literature or other works of art. It's sort of like people quoting movie lines or making pop culture references, except sometimes the pop culture is several hundred or several thousand years old. So you might have heard the phrase tilting at windmills. This comes from Miguel de Cervantes' novel Don Quixote, who's this crazy old guy who thinks he's a knight. And Don Quixote, goes out on his, noble charger, Rocinante, and he has his lance, and he sees a bunch of windmills, and he mistakes them for giants. And so he sets his lance, and he tilts, an old word for charging or jousting with a lance on a horse. He tilts at the windmills to try to slay the giants, and of course the lance gets stuck in one of the windmill blades, and he gets dragged up into the air, and it's very funny. So tilting at windmills means attacking imaginary enemies, because that is definitely not a giant, or trying to solve imaginary or impossible problems. There was nothing actually wrong with the windmills. Don Quixote just really thought they were giants and wanted to attack them. All right, so how do you use idioms, assuming you actually know what they mean? You use them to express your ideas more clearly and colorfully, or to associate your ideas with a larger body of thought. Idioms work by association, especially those that are literary or artistic references. So, when someone says, it's raining cats and dogs, it means it's raining very hard, okay? It's a more colorful way of saying it's raining really hard. If someone says, I've taken a shine to you, it doesn't mean they polished you, it means I liked you immediately. It's shorter and more colorful. All right. You can even make up your own idioms, assuming they're relatively clear. So you could say that idea is a home run. From baseball, of course, a home run, the ball gets hit way out, everybody who's on a base gets to run, go home and score. So it's a big success. So you would say an idea is a home run to mean that idea is a big success. You can come up with your own idioms as long as you don't mind explaining them the first couple of times you use them. All right. So how do you learn idioms? If you don't know them already, most native English speakers grow up learning a lot of them from at least their local area. How do you learn the ones you don't know? Well, idioms are one of the most difficult areas of English to master because there are so many of them, and English speakers keep adding more, sometimes just to annoy people. However, there are some ways that you can improve your grasp of idioms. Be a bookworm. That is an idiom that means read. A bookworm is someone who reads all the time, like a worm that lives in a book. Be all ears, which means listen very carefully. And be a nosy Parker, which means ask a lot of questions, poke your nose into things, pay attention. Those are the best ways to learn the idioms you don't already know. Read books so you'll learn a lot of the literary and artistic references. Listen when people talk so you'll pick up things that are common from older forms of English or traditions. And if you run into an idiom that you don't understand, ask somebody, what does that actually mean? You're only embarrassed once. All right. Let's do a little practice. Have you ever seen these idioms before? What do they mean? You're caught between a rock and a hard place. Stop being a backseat driver. This situation is no bed of roses. And that car is the apple of his eye. Take a good look. See if you can recognize anything. All right, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. That means you are caught between two bad options. This is a reference to Homer's Odyssey. And Odysseus and his guys are on the ship, and they're trying to get home, and they have to pass between a rock called Scylla and a hard place basically called Charybdis. And originally we would say you're caught between Scylla and Charybdis, but not enough people read the book anymore. So now we just say you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Neither one of those is a good place to be if you happen to be steering a ship. So it means you're caught between two bad options. Your best course is kind of to try to go down the middle and hope for the best. Stop being a backseat driver. Well, imagine that you're driving a car and someone is sitting in the back going, no, turn here, do this. Get really annoying, right? Well, a backseat driver is a person who tries to manipulate a situation even though he or she is not in control. They're, trying to control the driver from the back seat, which doesn't really work. All right. This situation is no bed of roses. That means this situation is no easy or pleasant thing. Nobody's really sure where this one comes from because you wouldn't think that a bed of roses would be very comfortable to lie on, what with the thorns, but I guess the actual rose part with the petals would be pretty soft, so a bed of roses is an easy or pleasant thing, and this is usually used in a negative context. You say, this isn't a bed of roses, or I never said it was going to be a bed of roses. So it's an exaggerated, easy thing. And as for the apple of his eye, that means the thing that he cares about most. Now, the apple of the eye comes from an interesting place. In the ancient world, the pupil of the eye was actually described as the apple. So you would say that something is the apple of your eye, the pupil of your eye. It's right in the middle of your eye. It fills your vision. It's what you focus on, look at, and think about all the time. So again, it comes from an older form of English, and we still use it. All right, let's see if we can find the correct idiom to use in each of these sentences. After Bob proposed to Sally, they announced they were between a rock and a hard place, raining cats and dogs, tying the knot, or striking while the iron is hot. We've talked about all of these idioms so far. Which one is correct? There you are, tying the knot. Our clue here was proposed, which in idiomatic English means proposed marriage. So they're going to get married. The only idiom on the list that means get married is tie the knot. Okay. My brother is always telling me how to do things, even though I don't want his advice. He's such a or an backseat driver, fair weather friend, apple of my eye, or bean counter. Take a good look. And the answer is backseat driver. If he's always telling you how to do things, even though you don't want his advice and he has no control over the situation, he's a backseat driver. He's the guy yelling directions from the back seat. A fair weather friend is a person who's only your friend or only on your side when it's favorable. Apple of your eye, of course, we went over. And a bean counter is somebody who is obsessed with the numbers and the data of something and really detail-oriented to the extent that they don't actually look at the larger situation. All right, one last practice example. That job would be perfect for you, and the boss is looking for someone to fill it. You've got to A, tilt at windmills, B, be as quiet as a mouse, C, save for a rainy day, or D, strike while the iron is hot. Take a good look. And the answer is strike while the iron is hot. Remember that blacksmith with his hot iron and he's hitting it with a hammer because now is the time to shape the iron? Well, if the job is perfect for you and the boss is right now looking for someone to fill it, this is an opportunity. You've got to take advantage of the opportunity. Tilting at windmills would imply that whatever you're trying to do is a little bit crazy. Being as quiet as a mouse, well, if you want that job, being quiet probably won't help you. And saving for a rainy day refers to putting money or resources aside in case of an emergency. Totally irrelevant to this. So as you can see, idioms are mostly a matter of practice, listening, and getting to know the culture in which you're speaking English. The more you read, the more you listen, and the more you ask, the better you'll be at understanding them and using them. And that's all for this lesson. Thank you for watching. Educator.com.